Esports is a real thing and is really going to fulfill a lot of the hype, but the live event is still a question mark.
Hey there, ALSD. Jared Frank here with Todd Mary, the Chief Marketing Officer for Delaware North. Full-time marketer, part-time esports fanatic. We just finished up a fabulous panel addressing the topic of esports, and clearly there are some additional questions that we would like to continue to cover here now. So thanks for joining us, Todd.
Sure, great.
I think one thing we've learned today throughout the week and even previous to this week is there's a lot of hype around esports. And that hype doesn't always match reality or what's possible for a venue. I'm wondering if you can speak to some of your experience with some of your clients, some of your venues who have come and asked you for some of your thoughts on the topic, and,
Sure.
and maybe what they had in mind wasn't necessarily realistic.
I mean, there's a lot of hype around esports in general, and I think some of it is real, meaning that esports in a handful of years will be just as big as everyone is saying it is. How that's going to translate to live events and then to buildings, I think, is a different matter. I mean, you talk about every building today wants to host a big event, Barclays Center, Staples, TD Garden, but then you have the baseball teams and you have the football teams who want to see about getting an esports event to their venue. And frankly, now that's probably where the hype is. It's really not realistic for some of these larger venues. I mean, there's never been an event the size of a baseball stadium or a football stadium ever held in the U.S. Yes, in China, yes, in Korea, but not here. Does that mean that won't happen in a few years? It might, but not today. And that's where I get worried about the hype. We've had some of our baseball clients come to us and say, hey, we've had organizers approach us and they're going to do an event for us for 2 days. And I said, woo, that's interesting. What titles? Because not all titles are available. The publishers control those events. So there's a lot of people out there talking about this sort of stuff, and I think that's where the hype comes in. And again, we've talked some of our clients off the ledge when it comes to expectations around hosting an event at a baseball stadium across 2 or 3 days. 5 years from now, absolutely that could happen. Today, it's not particularly likely. And that's where you worry a little bit about esports, because there's no doubt esports is a real thing and is really going to fulfill a lot of the hype, but the live event is still a question mark.
And can you give us some context on what these events entail? They're long days.
Yep.
They're multi-days.
Yeah.
How does that play into the calculus of operating these
Sure.
venues? And if you could segue that into the food and beverage component.
Yeah, no, that's an incredibly important part of it, right? The hospitality of, it's not unlike feeding an army, right? When you have people for 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours maybe, you can plan a meal or a day part. But when you have these long events, which tend to be, not all of them, but a lot of them are 9, 10, 12 hours a day, 2, 3, 4 days in a row, that's different. I mean, now you're talking about feeding people breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And by the way, feeding them as it happens now, a lot of times the same thing 3 or 4 days in a row. I can tell you my kids at home don't eat the same thing 3 or 4 days in a row, so I don't know why you expect fans to do that. So I think from an F&B standpoint, there's a real responsibility on folks like Delaware North and other F&B providers to really rethink how they serve fans in those sort of environments. And you talk about how it's different. Again, think about seating. Is any stadium seat today that's not a premium or perhaps a club seat really comfortable for 9 or 10 hours in a day? Probably not. They weren't built for that, right? They were built for baseball. They were built for a 2-hour game, not a 2.5-hour game like we have today, but certainly not built for 9, 10 hours. So even thinking about seating, thinking about how we allow people to congregate in social areas, and the social nature of these events is different than, again, a football or basketball or hockey. So there's a lot of things. I don't think we need to erase our playbooks. I think there's lots of stuff we can take from traditional sports that are relevant. I always use the example of cheerleaders. So you're not going to see cheerleaders at esports events, but what you will see in between those breaks or between matches, cosplay or other events out in the concourse that are fun and a distraction and keep people engaged and busy outside of the actual actions happening in the matches. So I don't say throw out the playbook for traditional sports. Lots we can learn, but I think when it comes to F&B and to just the physical plant of how these events are or where they're being held, I think we do need to sort of rethink what that means.
You mentioned baseball. We've had, call it 100 years to figure out the behaviors of a baseball fan and what they want and expect from the in-venue experience. We've had, call it 100 months to do the same for esports. So how do we expedite those learnings? How do we, with essentially no data now, there's an absence of data today, how do we acquire that data quickly in order to make good decisions?
Well, I think there's lots of things, and it's interesting. This is also not a demographic we've had in our buildings either. It's not like these are basketball fans who are now also esports fans, and they kind of know what to expect when they come. A lot of these fans have no preconceived notions. They're not going to just come and have the hot dog or hamburger they always have when they come to your building. A lot of times they haven't been to your building. So I think it's incumbent upon buildings and tournament organizers to really accelerate their fan learning. So it's surveying customers after an event. It's using social listening, which is, social media tools that allow you to eavesdrop on all the channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blogs, anything out there. So we can learn as much as possible in a short possible amount of time to understand what fans liked, what they didn't like when they came to our buildings. I also think, and it's a classic Steve Jobs thing, right? No one was asking for the iPod, no one was asking for the iPhone. So some of it is getting out ahead of fans too. These fans aren't necessarily going to tell you what they want, but it's incumbent upon a building, I'll use the TD Garden, that's our building, to take what they know about events, take what they know about these fans, and create those experiences, whether it's premium experience, whether it's F&B. And again, you're not going to nail it right out of the gate. It's the test and learn, right? Iterate quickly. The stuff that didn't work, try something new the next time. But it's that flexibility, which I'll put my hand up, is not traditionally something that F&B providers are very good at. We're very good at, mass, consistent, good quality, but regular feeding. We don't change the menu at the Garden every game, or even between the Celtics and the Bruins. But for these fans, you do need to be flexible and a little bit more willing to iterate and change.
And again, not being specific, but let's call it 50% of these events are general admission. Yep. And a growing number of them are providing in and out privileges. So those are unique components as well. How do they impact fan behaviors?
Well, so that's interesting. So you mentioned two things that are almost at odds with each other, because in and out, no one loves it from a venue per cap perspective. And particularly for those venues that are in the midst of a city or midst of an area where you can go have lots of different F&B options. But again, I think it's a reality. When we host events at Columbus with the Blue Jackets Arena, there is in and out. And, that's in an area where there's lots of options. And I think it's best for the fans. I'll use an place where we don't work, but I think it's a good example, Foxborough or someplace like that with the Patriots. While there's Patriots Place right there, it's not as many options. You're not in the middle of a city. But you mentioned general admission, which I think is really interesting, because what you find is when you have general admission, which is a large number of events, you have people simply not wanting to leave their seat, right? They've worked hard, they've stood in line to get that seat. Certainly don't want to leave for 1 or 2 hours because they'll lose those seats. I think it's, again, incumbent upon the venue and the F&B partner to come up with ways to deliver food and drink to the seat. Logistically, this is a nightmare. It's hard, it costs money to staff, but again, it's for us to figure it out. The fans don't care. If you told me, and I'm a fan, if you told me someone's going to deliver me a beer and whatever's on the menu to my seat in the middle of a big Dota tournament, I'd love it. Order it on my phone, they'd walk it down to us. I don't think we're going to get into the old world of hawkers roaming the arena. I think it's too distracting for these sorts of events. But again, that mobile ordering and that logistical delivering to seat, even if it's a premium price, and again, go back to these fans, they're not poor, they're affluent, more affluent than your average fan, they'll pay for that. So I think, again, incumbent upon us to figure it out.
And last question, we'll get you out of here on this. How are suites being used, or perhaps not being used for these events?
I do think that's a missed opportunity. Again, go back to the data that we know, right? Long days, multiple days events. I think suites and club spaces are a perfect example of space that today is being unused or mostly unused, or used in a non-monetized way, meaning being provided to teams or to people associated with the venue or the publisher. But again, long days, long hours, to have that comfortable space, to have that where there's a bathroom, where there's a food menu you can choose from that people will bring to you. And by the way, the sight lines are really interesting because, again, I'm talking about traditional suites. They vary place to place. The perfect sight line for some of these events is not right down by the stage because, in fact, you're not really watching the stage, you're watching the screen. So it's actually farther up in the bowl and where a lot of the suites are placed. So it's a brilliant viewing. I think what buildings and organizers need to figure out is what that price point is. I've talked about the affluence of these fans, and they are absolutely affluent, but they're not corporations. So you're not going to sell JP Morgan suite. You're not going to sell. So you're selling to individuals or small groups of individuals. So I think, again, incumbent upon the building to figure out what is that right price point or what is that right service point. And you asked a short question. I'm going to try and keep it to a short answer, but I think there's lots of different things you could do around technology, different ways you could activate between suites, between matches. You could compete in whatever the title you're watching is in informal tournaments around the arena. Lots of different things, but at the very basic level, space being unused that I think can be used and monetized if priced correctly and serviced at the right level.
Well, Todd, we certainly appreciate your time. This is a topic with much interest, and it is very quickly moving. I'm sure if and when we have this conversation a year from now, it's going to be completely different. So we look forward to being in touch.
Great.
We appreciate
Excellent.
your time.
Thanks, Jared.